Okay, so welcome to our webinar for Personalizing LabXchange for the ABE community. And with us today, we have Deb O'Reilly and Mary Lou. They're both teachers, and they work with developing curriculum for LabXchange in collaboration with ABE. They're both practicing ABE teachers and have used the ABE curriculum and LabXchange in their classrooms with their students. So we have a pretty short agenda today, not a significant agenda. We want to go through some things with you, and we're going to have a lot of practice time at the end to allow you to experiment with what we've kind of gone over. Please feel free to jump in, ask any questions as you need to along the way.
Okay.
Great. I'll take the first step here and just share my screen. If you're not familiar with LabXchange, feel free, you can follow along with us as we go through this. The idea is to use this platform as a support to what you do in the classroom. It's not a replacement for a learning management system, but it's a way to customize and create all these different learning assets in a sequence that makes sense for you and your students. So I'll show you a few of the basics. Deb will feature how to personalize and add your own stuff, and then I'll come back and talk about some of the classroom and user features if you do create an account. The first thing I will say though, it is completely free. There's not a paid aspect to this at all. Thanks to the generous funding of the Amgen Foundation, it's completely free for you. It's completely free for your students. You don't need an account to access any of these things. But if you want to create an account, it does unlock some additional powers to customize. So if you're here in the library with me, you can see, you can search in the top box if you have a particular topic you're interested in learning more about. Since this is ABE focused, if you want to look at biotech or micropipetting, it'll use that as a keyword and pull things up, right? If you don't have a keyword you want to search by and you're more interested in how students will interact with the piece of content, you can see here on the side, this content type sorts it by different types. So text, video, and image are pretty common. There's a bunch of those. Some of the unique ones to LabXchange are things like interactive. So if you click on that, you'll see there's a bunch of them here. What these are experiences that students can go through at their own pace. So this one we call a scrollable because it's controlled by just scrolling. So as you scroll, things will happen on your screen. You can go forward and backwards. So it's nice that it puts the power and the pace in the hands of the student. If you're using this more as a demonstration in class, or you want to feature something, you can skip to different points or use the arrows to kind of toggle to things. If you are teaching remotely, for example, I did this all the time. I'd be like, okay, let's look at how this hand is doing it. Okay, look how it's pushing the button and the liquid's moving, and you can go back and forth as many times as you need. So the scrollables, or these interactive pieces, are great. Both as illustrations of concepts, but also, allowing students to go back and forth. So that's one of the unique pieces of content in LabXchange. And you can find that again right here, content type interactives. Another one are the simulations. So these lab simulations, they have them for each of the ABE labs. Are virtual experiences. So this isn't like a click through by any means. Everything you do in the simulation does get recorded and have an impact on what shows up to the student. And you can experience it in these 3 different levels. So the first level here is a completely introductory, assumes you've never seen this technique before. It gives you the most detailed level of instruction. Whereas something like level 3 assumes you've maybe seen this before. It'll give you less detailed instruction and assume some background knowledge. So if you choose level 1, the setup of these simulations are pretty similar. There's a lab notebook navigation panel here on the side. It'll give you some background or context depending on the particular experiment. It'll show you the materials you can have the opportunity to manipulate. So each of these are meant to be a glossary or an introduction. You can click on them to learn more, and you can navigate between these different pieces however you'd like. The next part I think is unique because it has the interactivity for students. You can make a prediction by controlling these different things. If you're doing the gel electrophoresis, it might involve moving bands. If you're doing a transformation, right, it's plate prediction. So this part changes simulation to simulation, but it is completely, up to the student how they create their prediction here, and later it actually pulls through to this results section. So you can see here my predicted results are exactly what I put. So this is a great way for you as a teacher later. You can come back and look at these predicted results and have students think about, what did I predict versus what did I get? And you can see right now I haven't done anything in the lab scene. So right now this actual results is empty because I did nothing. So I have no results. To me, that's like one of my favorite parts, because students can't like game the system. They actually have to do things to get actual results, which is nice. And it does let them also compare to like the ideal results and have some reflective opportunities right here built in. Or, you know, I can often ask questions of my own as a follow-up. But so
I'm having trouble hearing you.
Once they make that prediction, they can then go on to the protocol, and you can see like this is an overview. But once they're in this scene, they can actually control all the pieces. So if you have students who like prefer a linear path and clear instructions, they can follow these steps. And as they complete them, if they select the 20, that's this one, right? It'll check it off and move to the next one. There are also boxes that pop up to help them either as tips for the lab scene, or if they make mistakes. So if you try to put the wrong tip on, right, it'll give you information there. Or if you have more exploratory students, or you want to use this more to ask a different question or experience the process of science, right, you can let them just play and it will record everything they do. Now this one is just moving dye around, so there's not a lot of things that can like go wrong. They could run out of dye, or you'll see if I'm measuring the wrong volume in the wrong place. It does keep track of that. It doesn't force me to do it the right way. And you can go through and change all the volumes that you want, measure it. So here, did I exceed? Not yet. Okay. You can measure the volume of liquid. You can put it back down. It lets you get rid of a tip. You can sort of play with this as you want, and it lets you really see what it looks like. So there I went to the second stop when I go to eject this. And skip to my results. You can see it'll follow through on what I'm doing. I didn't actually eject it. My little picture shows no liquid, so I didn't finish the step. So even though I thought I was ejecting it, I wasn't pushing the button down correctly. I get nothing. So it does give you the opportunity to have them practice with those lab skills, maybe save you some time, help students become familiar if you have like a limited time with these tools, if you don't have a set in your classroom and you're just borrowing them. This is a great way for them to practice and play. There are questions here at the end, sort of related to the lab technique or what they're doing in the experiment. And then there's a summary page for each simulation that has some like takeaway messages about the technique. So those are different options for each of the simulations that are created by LabXchange. So if you go back here, you can sort for them that way, simulation. And then if you want, you can see there are other ones, Concord Consortium, PhET. You can also filter here by content source, and these will pull up all the LabXchange ones that are connected to ABE. You'll see those labs that look familiar: transforming bacteria, restriction digest, protein purification, that kind of thing. The last type of thing I'll sort of feature here, in addition to the interactives and the simulations, they also have clusters and narratives that are kind of unique. They have other things like question sets and audio that you might be more familiar with, but the narratives are nice to feature for students to see themselves in science. These are all stories from a first person's perspective of different people and their journey in science. I like to feature these at the beginning of the year and then give students a place to sort of explore, to both illustrate, you too can be involved in science in some way. Your journey in science doesn't have to be linear. It's okay if you don't take AP Bio your freshman year. You're going to be fine. Look at all these different people and how they got to wherever they are in science. And, bring a little diversity in my classroom so that everyone can find, examples of people they can connect with. So the narratives are kind of unique to our platform. The other one here is our clusters. So these guys are groups of content, and it's organized sort of thematically. So for example, the ABE one that goes with ABE is this Foundational Concepts and Techniques in Biology. And this basically shows a bunch of different pathways or playlists of content that are pre-made for you. So these pathways you can create on your own, or you can use these pre-made ones. And you can see it'll give you tours of this cluster. So if you're like, oh, I'm doing lab 1, it's like these 2 might be a good place to start. You're like, oh, well, I want to really connect this to genetic engineering as a theme. You can choose that as a tour. So maybe it's less technique related and more thematic. And this just suggests an order and which pathways to go through. Alternatively, you can just use this cluster as a place for your own professional development, as a way to connect to information, or give students an opportunity to explore. But if you click on one of these, you'll see it does bring up a pathway. And these pathways are just a sequence of learning concepts. So like a question set, a text, a video, different components in whatever sequence you want. These are the pre-made ones. And you'll see it gives you an idea of like what it might connect to, some background knowledge. All of the ABE ones actually are also made in other languages. So if you go to the library, if you have students who don't speak English, who might prefer to interact with this in another language, you can toggle the languages here, and you'll see there's a whole range of them to find one that might better fit. So if that's an easy connection for your students, you want to see what's available in their language, or you want to help them understand some of the science vocabulary, let me uncheck the English one, then you can see what's available there. So those are just nice connections related to that cluster and specifically ABE content. So all that ABE cluster is translated into those languages. But I know Deb was going to talk about how to customize these pathways. And before we get to that personalization part, I do need to mention the account piece. So up here at the top, we've just been exploring the library. This library is accessible to you, your students, anybody. Like, you don't need an account. You can just use the URL to point them to any of these places. If you want to share the cluster, or if you want to share a particular pathway, you can just use the URL. But if you do create an account, and you can see I've created one, my little face is appearing here. If I log out, it'll prompt you to log in or sign up. If you do that, it doesn't take very long. It does ask that you're 13 years or older for privacy considerations. And then you create an edX account. So once you have this edX account, you can use it for edX, you can use it for here. You only have to create one once. And once you have one, then you are good to go. That unlocks and brings you to this dashboard feature. And this is only visible if you have an account. So this would be where you have your own content. This would be if you want to run a class through LabXchange, you can put it here. If you want to take a class, I know ABE has some classes that they run, or like professional development classes here, or other teachers have classes, you want to see their content. You can see all those things in your dashboard. So yeah, so I'm going to hand it over to Deb here for a second, and she's going to talk to you about how you customize content, particularly one of those pathways. And then I'll come back and can talk more about classes later.
So before I get going, Tom, did you have any questions about what Mary just kind of went through there?
No, all was good. Am I really the only one here? I find that crazy. That doesn't work for Amgen. I didn't know about the narratives, which is awesome, especially because you can't tell, but I'm white. But I'm always trying to look for diversity and like non-white scientists, because the older videos and narratives and that sort of thing, it tends to be a white guy usually. So I can't really remember which ones I used during the year. I know I did one of the gel electrophoresis labs. I didn't do the practice pipetting labs. And I saved all my Biorad stuff for next year. I know it sounds sad.
Biorad. Uh-oh. All right, so what I'm going to do right now then is take you through, and we happen to pick the gel electrophoresis pathway, so maybe that will be helpful. so let me share my screen here, and I'm going to show you how you can customize the LabXchange pre-made pathways to be more, comfortable in your teaching environment. I know as an educator, and Mary does the same thing, I like to take stuff that's pre-made and then massage it to be more fitting for what I particularly am teaching, because we all know that no two classes of students are the same, and you often have to do things differently that for one class even than you might do for the same class, same level of class, but different set of students. So if you go to the LabXchange platform here, and you are in your dashboard, if you go to the library and search under content type to clusters, I'm going to take us to the ABE cluster, which is that foundational concepts and techniques in biotechnology. This is the one that predominantly mimics the ABE labs 1 through 6. So if you do those in your classroom, you'll see that those are all found in here. And we're going to look at the tools and technologies in gel electrophoresis pathway. And what's nice about these pathways is they are clonable, which basically means you can make a copy of the pathway in order to edit it and either add assets that you want that you don't see in the created pathway, or maybe you don't have as much time to go through all of the assets that have been put in the pathway and you might need to get rid of some things, or maybe you don't like the order in which it's presented, etc. There's lots of different things you're going to do, and hopefully we can show you some really easy ways to customize this. So if you click on these little dots up here, you'll see it's going to give you the option to clone the pathway. So I'm going to click on clone pathway, and I have my cloned pathway now. And I'm going to actually rename it once it pops up so that I know that that's my version of it cloned. It will also now come up as a private private pathway because I'm editing it, but I'm just going to say for ETHS, which is the school I work at. You can change the notes here. You can add links. You can do all kinds of things up here if you want in the directions. But the first thing I'm going to do here is when I teach a biotech career vocation. So I teach at a technical high school. So I have my students for 6 hours a day, week on, week off. So I can have kids that are in AP biology all the way down to our CP2 biology and have reading and other language-based learning disabilities. So when I assign any kind of reading like this, I also need to give them a directed or a guided reading to do with it. Sometimes I'll assign that guided reading to the whole class, or sometimes I'll assign that guided reading to individual students who really need it. And Mary's going to talk to you a little bit about classes at the end if we have time. So if the kids are going to read this, what I typically will do, I think I want to go back here. Yeah. Oops. Sorry about that. Is I'm going to edit my pathway. So first thing I need to do is save this. So I'm going to agree to the LabXchange terms and save the pathway, and then I'm going to be able to go in and edit it. So I can either click on these 3 buttons again and edit the pathway, or I can click up here. There's 2 ways to get into that edit position of the pathway. So I want to add content. So what I'm going to do is scroll all the way down to the bottom of the pathway here, and you'll see that there's an add the content button, and I'm going to click on that. And I can either add content directly from the library. I can add content that I've already uploaded and that maybe I'm looking at using. So I've already put it up in my information. I can have favorited things out of the library, which I recommend you do if you see something you like, favorite it, because this takes away the ominous part of like searching for a ton of stuff. Or I can go to add new content. I'm going to click on add new content so you see how this is done, and I'm going to add text. What text allows me to do is I'm going to link to a document that I've already created. So it's going to ask you this anytime you go to edit it. You just click publish and create. So this is going to be guided reading for electrophoresis asset 1. So I'm just going to give it a name. And this is just going to tell the students here, use this guided reading to assist with note taking, or whatever. And then I'm just going to add the link here to my asset. So I have this down. I have guided reading notes that I've already created for my students. It actually has there's 2 parts. This is the first reading, and this is the second text. So I would probably split this into 2 if I wasn't going to assign both assets at the same time. I could assign the first one and create a second document, but for right now, I'm gonna copy this link in here. Oops. Sorry. And then go back here. Oops. Oh, I lost it. My content, right? There it is. Nope. Sorry. Darn it. There it is. Sorry. Too many tabs open. And I'm just going to link by putting the URL here, highlighting that word. And now when the students look at this, it's going to say guided reading. They're just going to have to click on that and it'll bring them to that. And I can fill out all of this information here. I can upload an image if I want to, etc. I'm just going to keep this pretty simple for right now. And it's just going to show it as a text when it comes up. And I'll show you what that will look like. It's going to take a second for it to publish. Okay. So if we go back to the pathway now, you'll see that that guided reading is at the bottom and it appears just as a text. One of the nice things is I can move this to wherever I want it. So I want it to be right under gel electrophoresis, or as you saw that it had both of these readings. I had questions for both of those readings. So I'm actually going to move it either through these arrows, just move it up, or I can just drag it to where I want it, which is after this second reading here. And now the students will read what is gel electrophoresis, what is DNA, and then they'll be looking at this guided reading to do while they're doing these. Or I can put it first so that they open this first and then open the text, and this will be open while they're going through reading these texts. It depends on how you would want to work that. Suppose that I don't want them to have to do this pathway feedback survey. We're just not going to have enough time, and I give my own survey or something like that. I'm just going to click the trash here, and that will delete that from my pathway. And I recommend saving this often as you go through. It's just going to save over the same thing every time you do it. So right now you can see we have the guided reading, we have the 2 texts, and then there's a simulation here. And one of the nice things about the simulations that Mary showed you is that you can have the students make their predictions and then report their results. And I like to often, when I do this, I like them to screenshot these results, and Mary actually gave me notes for that. So this is a work that she had, and we're going to open this in a second here, which asks her students to do exactly that. She has them insert the images for her predictions, her protocol, and her results as part of the work to make sure that students understand what they're doing. And it's just another way for you to monitor your students and how they're doing. So again, I'm going to go back to the pathway. And I'm just going to click on edit once again. And I'm going to add content again. So just kind of, I know the process is a little repetitive, but I figure that's the best way for us to do it. And I'm going to add text again. And this is just going to be reporting results. Please take screenshots and report. Same process, just a different way to look at it. So instead of doing guided notes, you're actually looking for formative assessment here. So I'm just going to insert this link and save this down here. And these are Google, I don't know if you're a Google school, but Google Docs that are created. What's nice about that is you can, quickly identify and locate your students' work and breeze through it to see, who's really getting a concept versus who's just going through the simulation, not paying attention to what they're doing. And normally I would take the time to put different pictures in here so the students recognize what's happening, but you can look that this is now attached to our pathway. Finally, one of the really cool features is you can add videos. So here's a video that's being shown. It's a 3-minute and 11 video, but maybe you use a video in your classroom that you really like, and or you didn't want to go through the whole pipetting pathway, but you do want your students to maybe understand pipetting because they're going to need to maybe pipette for the simulation. So you want to show a video there. So you can add content that way. So again, I'm going to go into adding content, and I'm going to add from my content. And Mary, I might need you to remind me what the name of that video is.
I think it's just micropipetting. It's from the University of Leicester. You could filter by video if you want.
Oh yeah, could do that too.
Take away where it says keyword, micro, little X. Right above the two assets, it says, yeah. That one, using a micropipette.
Okay. So this is, it's a video that's a little bit longer than you might want to use. So you can actually assign them to the length of the video that you want to show. And again, Mary, I think I'm going to need you to show this part or explain this part.
Yeah, you can click on pathway if you want, where it says add or assign to on the left. And then choose the one that you were working in. These are all your pathways.
Yeah.
And then once you're here, I think because you just clicked on it as opposed to hit the little plus, it just opened it. So anytime you click on the box, it opens it in a new tab so you can like check it out before you decide you want to add it or not. Yeah, you can click edit pathway. That will work.
Now I know how to add the video. I just couldn't remember how to get to the times that you wanted.
Oh yeah, that's the little settings wheel.
Yeah. All right. So, okay. So I'll add this video again. So let me just, sorry about this. Search by.
This one's under your content?
Yeah.
I think you're looking in the library.
Oh, thanks, Mary. Sorry. There we go. Oh, I should have just clicked
You have
that.
to,
Yep.
you got to hit the little plus button.
I know, I did it again. Let me go back. Sorry. Just click this. Click the add button, add
I
one
know.
item, and now it's
Yeah.
Now I don't want to show this whole video, Tom, so I'm gonna click on the settings and I'm gonna play only from, that's what I need help with. I couldn't remember a particular portion of this video. Do you remember the times, Mary? It's like 3 something to.
Yeah, I think it's 6 minutes and 30 seconds is the want part. I love this video. It goes through and it shows like all the wrong ways to do things, but every time they do it wrong, it goes wah, and the kids like die laughing. But
now if you
it's
look,
copyrighted.
it's kind of like a game. It makes it a little gamified. So if you look now,
Gilson or thin micropipetters are one of the most commonly used instruments in a molecular biology laboratory. They're used in.
That didn't work.
I think if you're in your pathway, so I think you have to watch it as part of your, so it doesn't change the video permanently. So one of the things about your pathway is that, okay, so you're here, your pathway, go ahead, hit publish and save.
Right.
One of the things about modifying your pathway is you're not changing anything permanently. You've either created a copy or you're modifying a version of it. So here in your pathway, now if you click play, it should just show you where it started. So now it started not at the beginning, the little play button. You can still scroll to other parts, but.
Right, and you'll notice now this says private up here because we have altered the video a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so, and then finally, the last part that you might want to add is an assessment, like if you want to test the kids on something. There are questions that come with this pathway, so you can see that there's a question set, but maybe you want to add something else to this other than what they have here. And you can do that the same way we just showed you. You can either create a Google Doc and go into a text and add a link that way, or when you go down to add new content, you can actually add it in with the LabXchange feature, which is add a question set or questions, and you can do it that way. And you can do multi-select, short answer, or a single select. And then you would just create it there, and it would appear in your pathway. So there's lots of different ways to modify this. And at this point, what our plan was to have you actually try and modify a pathway by adding some of your own content. I don't know if we still want to do that. I'm gonna stop sharing and see what people think since it's just Tom in here.
I was saying it's up to you, Tom. Would you like some time to play, or do you want us to show you some other things?
I guess you could show me some other things, because I guess the only question I really had was, is this compatible with Google Classroom? I've only used it with my AP kids, and they're usually pretty sharp, and they're not the kids who tend to get lost on online things. But I can't remember if I just gave them a link, or like, did I, there's got to be a way where I can assess, did they actually do it?
Yeah. So maybe this next part is relevant.
So that leads right into what Mary was going to do. There was extra time, Tom. Very well done.
Yeah.
Almost
This
like
I helped you.
Yeah, these are the classes features. So there's 2 ways. I'm a Google school as well. So there's 2 ways you can assign things to Google Classroom. One, if you're just in the library and you're not modifying things, you can click the 3 dots, hit share, and you can share it directly to Classroom. Like this will create a link in your classroom and send students directly back here. So if you want, you can do it that way.
Okay.
If you want to see how they're interacting, again, on this dashboard piece, and this is what I do with my students, is I have them join the class at the very beginning of the year. So I just create a class here, make up the name, set a maximum number of students. You can add co-teachers if you want, if somebody else needs to monitor your class, like a special ed teacher or a someone else who's teaching the same section. And once you create your class, they just have to join this class code. So they enter the 6 digits that appear at the top, kind of like Google Classroom. And they only join once. So like once they're joined, they can see as you add new content, they can see all the new pieces. If you change it, it's all right there. They just enter that code on their dashboard where it says classes I'm in. And on your perspective, you can just add content here, and anything they interact with in your class, you get some information back from them. And again, if you're sharing this in Google Classroom, you can either just share the URL. So that's what I do. I just post this link if I've personalized it and I want them to, and I want to get the information on how they're interacting with. The URL is specific to your class in this way. The information you get back is actually in the progress tab. But one thing about using the class feature is you can post things sort of linearly, or you can sort of show and hide things. So if you want to add content, you do it the same way like Deb was showing. There's a button at the bottom here that says add content, and it puts it in this unposted area. So this is like what I think of as like waiting in the wings. And depending on the class, like for my AP class, you're right, they can handle all kinds of things. I just leave it as one long list. For my biotech class and some of my CP sections, like if there's more information than necessary, they get easily confused. So I just hide things and leave it unposted until we're ready to use it. So if we're doing the unit on DNA, then I'll post that, and then I'll just click these 3 dots and unpost things. That just puts it back in that unposted section. So you can choose, you know, whether you want them to see all the things or some of the things. You can double check what you've posted by using this little toggle in the right-hand side. So this is what it would look like to students. They don't see the long list of other stuff. They only see the things you've chosen to post. And then in progress, they actually see, you can see as the instructor if they've interacted with the pieces of content. If you put an assessment question or a question set in there, you can see what percentage they got correct. And it gives you like an overall view of your whole class, like how many people completed it or how much of the pathway did they complete. If they do complete it, it tells you what date they completed it on. And you can download this report and import it into your grading system. Like we use Infinite Campus for our grading part. So this is a way to see if they're interacting. Now you can't see like, did they answer C for this particular question? Like it doesn't give you that level of granular feedback. So when I'm using this in class, I use this as just a way to sort of keep tabs on how they're interacting with things, but I'll build in my own personal like Google Form assessments or Google Doc assessments to get sort of conceptual understanding from them. So that's the progress part. It is private, so anytime someone asks to join your class, it will pop up and say like, do you approve them? So that you know like only the people in your class are people that you know. You only have to do that once. It's not something you have to do all the time. And like I said, like what I do for my classes, I just start posting the URLs and it'll point them back to this place. So I can customize these and make them whatever I want. Like you can see anytime it's something I've created, it'll show my name as the author, as opposed to like the ones with the little flag will have, you know, an author that's not me. Anything that's private are things that I've modified in some way. So you kind of have the option for both. And you do get some feedback in this progress section in terms of how they're interacting. So yeah, you can create a bunch of different versions. So like in my library, kind of like what Deb was showing, you can personalize them with like notes. So if I have instructions for students, like check this out, make sure you review this vocab, or this connects to a topic in class, you can modify those pieces in that little settings wheel as well. This like note section lets you add or tack on sort of a personal like text box on top of whatever it is. So maybe I'm not changing the asset, like I like the interactive, but I want to point out like make sure to pay attention to these vocab words, or if I'm adding extra vocab support for students, that's one way you can do it. And then if I want to make things optional, like sometimes I'll put notes like that so that I can sort of extend and support. I'll add things to give them instructions. Like this note says, come practice with me. So when we were hybrid, I would assign sort of like work at your own pace. And then I have a few lab stations set up so that when they got to those parts, they could come see me and practice loading. In this case, I think that's what, yeah, a real gel. If they wanted more time to review, they could watch the extra videos. So it did give them options in that way. And in my content library now, I have a couple different versions of this pathway. This one's for my AP class because we followed it up with this cancer lab. For my biotech class, I have this version because biotech was completely remote last year. So I had to build in extra, like review things. Like I have this flashcard game I found online. If you've ever heard of Flippity, you can basically using Google Sheets, like build these cool games. So I imported that in here so they could play this like flashcard game. Remote students needed things like graphic organizers, so I could embed those in, and they could just download it to support them going through this. So there are a bunch of different ways you can sort of personalize and customize that, and that's all in your dashboard if you have an account. The classes you teach lets you give it out to students, and then students see it in the classes I'm in section. One last piece before I ask again if you have any questions is here in the learners. If you do want to check in on an individual student, like if your class is really large, you can just click the progress and it shows you that one student's progress. So if you've assigned things over like a long period of time and you're like, oh, you know, Susie Q, let me see how you're doing in here. Like, oh, you've only completed 50% of the things, great. You can see it all on one page. And then you can actually message them directly. This is my demo class, so you can talk to them and only they see the message. You can also send them individual things. So if you're in that learner's view, and I'm like, oh, Deb was absent. She missed, you know, this thing we did in class. You can assign her a specific piece of content, either something you've created under your content or something from the library. So it won't show up in that class feed for everybody, but it will show up for that one person. So it's just another way if you want to like personalize what you're sending out to students, you can assign them things individually as well. So there you go, a few extra class things.
Thank you. That was very helpful.
Yeah.
I don't think I was familiar with all those different items that are available.
Nice. Yeah, and they're always actually, now that you know, they've realized the power of all the virtual assessments, virtual remote science opportunities for lab simulations and building science skills. That was really the purpose of the platform, but now that it's really taken off, they're actually adding more things. Like they're going to build a report at the end of those simulations, so you could download for each student how students answer. So that's coming, it's just not public yet. It's not available yet, but they are like always looking for educator feedback. And since they were looking for, since that's a common point that teachers would like to know, how do my students answer these questions? They are adding more things.
Tom, do you have your students, or do you plan to have your students create accounts?
I'm trying to think last year if I created, I only had one AP class, it was small, and I only used it with AP, and I think I created a class. I just, believe it or not, I can't remember. We're actually doing in-service this week, but it's remote. But we're going to be face-to-face. But they kind of gave us the option of this week, here are all these sessions, you'll get paid $25 an hour, a maximum of 16 hours. Pick and choose what you want to go to, and some of it's coming back.
Yeah, of course. Just an important thing to note is if you do want to have a class for your students, then your students need to create accounts. Like Mary had mentioned, they can certainly access the assets, the public assets without an account, but they would need to have an account to actually be enrolled in a class.
And is that free, or is that?
Yeah, no, everything's free. Yep, it just requires them. There's sometimes there's difficulty with student accounts for different reasons. But if you don't have a problem with that in your system, then that's fine. Not with LabXchange accounts. Some systems have have difficulties or concerns about students creating accounts on different platforms, not just LabXchange. So the workaround for that is that they would just do, the public assets, but it was just a little more limited. If they can create an account, that's really the best way to go.
Well, they can do the private assets too if you give them the direct link. You just can't monitor their progress.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
So, but like what I have my students do is create a Google account just for LabXchange. So they create their own Google Gmail for LabXchange, and that's the only thing they use it for is to log into LabXchange. Then it's not tied to anything personal. So if that is a concern that you might have in your district about having them create accounts, it works out because it's that they only use it for LabXchange, their LabXchange account.
It hasn't been a problem yet. I mean, they all have a district email, and it's basically a Gmail account, but it has our district name after, at the end.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the way that most districts have gone because it's free.
Well, Tom, do you have any questions for us?
Not right now. I'm supposed to Zoom at 1 o'clock, which that's the West Coast time. But I know I just need like anything else to sit down, refresh my memory. I always thought it'd be nice to use this as a preview to some of the more expensive labs that you really don't want the kids to botch the lab because some of the kits are over $100, and it's nice to have them go through like a dry run on the computer before they do the real thing. Or as a summary, like, okay, I don't really know what I did. I put these fluids in these tubes, and well, what was supposed to happen?
That's exactly how I used it last year because we were day on, day off. So on their off days, their remote days, they would get basically pre-lab, kind of a flipped classroom model. And when they would come in, I would expect them to be ready to do the lab, that they would understand like what the setup is necessary and things like that. So it works pretty well for the most part.
Yeah, some of the platforms have really come a long way compared to what they used to look like. The only thing I don't like about some of the online simulations is the kids never get bad data. Like they don't like over pipette or, and it's holding a pipetter is a unique thing. You can't do it by clicking a mouse. The community college where I teach, that's one of the few courses that they absolutely said, no, these kids have to be face-to-face because we're not going to give them a certificate.
That is one of the nice features of LabXchange. Like if you're doing the restriction digest or whatever, and you don't set the incubator at the right temperature, then you're plating or whatever, you'll get no colonies on your plate, or if you plate them wrong, they'll have to go back and figure out what the mistake is that they made. One of the pieces that I like, so they can't just click and ignore what they're doing. They have to pay attention.
Mm-hmm.
It's good to know. And they don't have to go through the struggle of making auger plates in a few hours.
Yeah.
You gotta use the ABE. You gotta use your ABE people and get them to send you your auger plates.
I teach at the community college where I borrow the ABE stuff. And then every year I'm just wondering, well, do I want to go to the trouble to check it all out when I usually only do 2 or 3 biotech labs straight and my district will pay for it. But I also don't have a good budget. If I did the ABE way, I would save money.
And time.
True.
All right.
Well, I don't want to keep you, and I'm going to check in at 1 o'clock on the Pacific time. But thank you. I'm glad I made use of your time. I can't believe I'm the only one.
No, this is great. I'm glad you stuck around. This is great.
I would say consider, putting in a session at NABT because I think people would be interested.
Yeah, we did. The last time it was in person, we actually did present there. We haven't done we didn't do last year when it was virtual, and I think it's back in person this year. So maybe we do. We also will do sessions for school districts. If your department or something, you know, has a group of teachers, they want to help, you know, use the platform. The LabXchange does offer like PDs for specific districts if you are interested in that, or if your colleagues, you know, want a tutorial.
Yeah, because we have a whole biology and AP biology clusters now. So like there's a lot of curriculum support up there for both of those.
Yeah, and I just threw in the chat the remote learning cluster in case you wanted something to like read, if that's helpful too. It actually links to all the help desk articles on like how to customize your pathway, or how do you add your own content, or what are those simulation things they were talking about. It goes through, it has videos as well, but there's a lot more sort of guidance that you can use if you want to reference there.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
And it's only biology, right? There's no chem?
Oh, there's
There
a chem
is.
cluster too now. Chem and
Yeah,
physics.
there's chem and physics.
Okay, so if I have to sell my department on it.
Yeah. They can search the library. There's all kinds of content there in those different subject areas.
Okay,
There's
now I see.
chemistry. And you can, if they don't, you can use those to sort. If you do go to that cluster, I know they've created clusters for all the main topics. So there's bio, there's chemistry, and they also have physics. So those could be a place to start if, you know, you're trying to onboard new folks and they just want to check out what's in those different sections. Those exist as well.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
You're welcome. Nice to meet you, Tom.
All right.
Thanks,
have a
Tom.
good Thursday, right?
Yeah, it's Thursday. Yeah.
I'm sorry my camera didn't work.
It happens. No worries.
Yeah, no worries.
Technology.
All right. Well, I
Have a
guess I
good day.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Well,